What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Longbox Sessions. I'm your host, Alex Dandino.
And I'm Josh Griffey.
Oh my goodness, guys. It has already been an exciting 2020. Who knew? Oh my goodness. I hope you guys are doing well. I hope your new year. I hope your Christmas. I hope the end of your year was well. We've been a little dormant. Working on other stuff, family things, all kinds of good stuff. But nevertheless, we're back for a strong and awesome 2020. We hope it was a lovely new year. Griff, was your new year lovely?
No, the exact opposite. I ended and started the year with stomach flu. So, yeah, that was great. I'll spare you the details. You get it.
Fair enough,
Nothing going in, lots coming out. It was miserable.
Fair, but, it happens. What are you going to do? I don't know.
It happens. It's time to cleanse the soul and move on to a powerful 2020. So much good comic book stuff. We got to get back to work.
So much great comic book stuff, guys. We do want to let you guys know we're sorry we've been a little dormant, but at the same time, sometimes you got to reassess, and I promise you this 2020 will be an even better long box sessions than you ever possibly could have hoped. Griff, I'm going to start the year off correctly. Did you read anything cool over Christmas?
Oh my God. This was the year where finally all of the Christmas gift cards and stuff, I don't get a ton of gifts anymore, right? Because I'm an older guy. But it kind of all hit perfectly for me this year, where I got essentially all bookstore gift cards and an Amazon card, right? So I got two more of the Hellboy Library editions. I got Silver Surfer Black, which I actually got the Treasury edition. If you're going to own Silver Surfer Black, you owe it to yourself to have that in Treasury form.
Totally.
The gigantic book makes that artwork envelop your brain. It's unfucking believable. DC and DC Blacklist are coming out with all kinds of great stuff. So I actually got you Superman Year One by Frank Miller for a Christmas gift, and I was like, I should pick this up for myself. It'll be amazing, and we'll want to talk about it. It was something, and we're going to talk about it.
Definitely got to talk about it, that's for sure. Yeah, Superman Year One, Frank Miller, Jr. Jr. You'd think match made in heaven. Frank Miller, Jr. Jr. worked before on the Daredevil Man Without Fear book. That was lovely as well. Superman Year One was a very interesting read. We are definitely going to be focusing more on being positive this year, even with things we did not exactly enjoy. But nevertheless, Superman Year One is very fascinating.
Well, let me hit you there, right? Because I would say I wouldn't give the book a marvelous review as a piece of work. But I enjoyed Superman Year One in that at this point we've had so much Superman in this and that anything that gets you thinking about the character as a whole like that, the book is really good about making you ponder the big ideas of Superman and what you like about Superman. Because to me, I don't think I've ever really seen him in this light. So the book is broken into three parts. It's Smallville, Atlantis, right, which is essentially where he's training to become a Navy SEAL, which is probably the strangest chapter of the three. And then we finish in Metropolis for another very weird, just kind of hodgepodge of a story. But what did you make of the different segments? What had stuck out to you in this book?
I think what stuck out to me is how Frank Miller took a lot of it's just so I don't even know where to begin, man, honestly. It's so bizarre. To me, Superman Year One, the beginning is very much kind of the modern take on what we've all sort of been enjoying over the last couple of years, or not enjoying, depending on how you feel about it, of the Superman mythos, especially in Smallville, which is keep your light under a bushel. And that's been this whole thing, the entire, to me, the theme of the Smallville segment is don't tell anyone, but also still do the right thing. And that's also been that's a very popular thing for Smallville to be about, as far as Clark's relationship to Smallville. Mm-hmm. But there's also a lot of this I don't know, it's so strangely written. The voiceover is very strange to me. There's a lot of this
right.
I feel like in the panels a lot of the time there's a lot of this dialogue and a lot of bubbles that are just there. And you're did you need to write one, or could you just let the art kind of do its thing? There's a lot of there's a lot of times where I feel like the artwork just needs to stand on its own, and there's a bubble there to sort of like move things along. It's sort of the antithesis of what we talk about when we read comics, at least for me, which is like the art's the one that should be doing the work. Like,
well, I mean, I think at this phase you're hiring Frank Miller to get it out, right? Like, you want more of these great Frank Millerisms before you go.
Right.
I think the weird thing about this Smallville to me, because the modern Kents, I do like the take, right? There's a little bit of they were too perfect in older versions of this, right? They were so saintly that how could Clark fail, right? And I do think that makes the Kents not as interesting as they are just down-to-earth, humble, good people trying their best in a semi-unwinnable scenario. Something like Brightburn brings this to mind. Like, they're not bad people in Brightburn. They're just overwhelmed, right? Because they're not only parents, but they're starting with, like, all these extra problems that we would find hard to deal with our kids. So the bringing the Kents in this one, the weird thing he does is it feels like Clark is already pre-programmed to be what he is, and he's just tolerating the Kents.
Yeah.
That's the weird thing.
I think that's the weird thing, too, is he's like, the baby version of Clark is old enough to have memories of Krypton. Like, that's, I think,
they say as he grows, his memories keep filling in. So it's almost as if they're downloaded in him like a computer.
Right. There are wrinkles of what I think we've seen in the movies a little bit, the movies and TV shows, which I thought was kind of interesting. Like, I'm surprised Frank Miller decided to add those items, and like, but again, modernizing the Kents and making them a little more flawed. Like, short of like Ma Kent's pies and her ability to bake, there's not a whole lot of Americana, I would say, that's included in what we see for the Kents. Like, I mean, they are supposed to be ideally
right. It feels like there's not even parenting. Americana. That's the part that bothered me.
Well, no,
it feels like they're just like keeping him alive until Jor-El can finish the upload, and then I got this from here.
Like, like they're basically just like, I don't know, very prolonged babysitters. Like, it's very weird.
Yeah, like I think at one point Pa Kent's like, "Hey, sometimes you might have to rough a fool up, but don't like shatter their bodies like balloons." And I was like,
well, then he's like, "Don't tell your mom I told you that." I'm like,
yeah,
okay.
But see, I like that because that's how that guy would parent his own son.
Sure.
But he knows that this son will not lose a fight. But my dad used to say that if you see a bully, walk up and punch him in the nose. It's how men used to pass on information. We thought that kind of shit was important.
Right.
And so I like moments like that, but they're few and far between. And it doesn't feel like the lessons that he learned, because that's an inherent part that is important in Superman, right? We see that in Red Sun. If he ends up in communist Russia, that changes very much how he sees his mission, right? As someone greater and above us, which he undeniably is, right? He is above us and better than us in a lot of ways.
Right.
So while the Kents need to be kind of flawed, normal all parents get overwhelmed, let alone if you have a super baby, right? That would be fucking scary. I have normal babies and they are little horror shows, right? Like, that would be extra scary if they could lift me up and snap my arm, Like, my kid's now tall enough, he runs up, and when he tries to greet me, he just punches me in the dick. If he was Superman, I might not have genitals. That's something that needs to be addressed, right? That would be scary. So
a fine point.
Yeah, like the point of them being real people and overwhelmed, I like that. But there has to be a reason why the Kents are important to him. Right? Like,
there's a
him
lot
being
of
on that farm in Kansas has to matter, and in this book, I feel like it doesn't.
Well, that's like the really... Yeah, I agree. Like, I think the really difficult part is that there's all these things... Like, this is truly the kind of, like, real-world application of Superman, which is, okay, like, he can't tell everyone he can fly and do all those other things, so him going, like, playing football, and him, like, dealing with bullies in his own way and like knowing how badly he can hurt them without like anyone like raising an eyebrow, that kind of thing. That is, I think, the more odd. That's the oddity to me in this book. And that's the thing I'm not sure I totally agree with the writing style, I guess. Like,
but we've seen that scene before, him playing football, things like that.
Well, yeah, but he's never been like the fucking, like, we've seen that stuff before, but like in this context and in the context of like what you were saying, which is that like the farm and learning the value of a hard day's work and learning the value of being human is what the Kents are.
Yes.
Like the Kents are meant to teach the earthbound Clark the ability to be human is what makes you great. Right. So factor that in with your superiority over the human race, and that's what gives you the ability to be Superman rather than, super God.
Right, but that's the prime example of this book, right? Which is, I want to break free. I want to show them how great I am. I'm going to carry 10 guys into the end zone with me. Right? So as the crowd is cheering him and the girl is coming up to kiss him, they don't have a powerful scene plastered right next to that shows the Kent's reaction, which is, that's not what makes you great. Like, that's not impressive. You could do that every play.
Well,
that's the scene that's missing.
Well, I agree. And what's interesting, too, is the scene after that where they're baling hay. Again, this is the part where I don't agree with the way the book's presented. Is like J.R. Jr. is a great artist. Like,
the art is phenomenal in this book.
I love John Romita Jr. Like, everything about, like, from Marvel to his DC work, like, he's a wonderful artist. So we should have that scene to converse. And instead, it's buried in the dialogue where they're baling hay, and he's literally like, yeah, maybe you can use your powers. Like, because when they're baling hay, he says, hey, I've enlisted. I'm going to go into the Navy because I got to see the world. And he's like, well, that's great. Your mom's going to be pissed off, but it's good you're using your powers for good rather than being a jerk. And I'm like, I don't think this is like, again, that's not using the artwork the way it's supposed to be used. Like, if you're going to have a great artist like J.R. Jr. be there, you should be doing what you're talking about, which is showing the inverse panel. Like, you need to let the art do the work. And right now, like, to me, that opening issue to me is that the opening issue of the book is that Frank Miller's writing too much. There's not enough just straight up imagery. And the imagery that is always punctuated by odd single line bubbles and some of this other stuff. So again, I feel like it's missing the point of what makes comic books great. And then I also feel to a certain extent it's missing the point of Superman in general, and like the lesson he's supposed to learn and the point of being in Smallville.
Well, that's the strange part is like,
I wouldn't expect Frank
feels
Miller.
Like an interesting character for Frank Miller to tackle. So what is it that we like about Frank Miller, and how does that help us examine Superman? And there are parts of it. This Superman's a little hardened and a little cynical in Smallville. From a really early age, he knows how much better he is. Right. I think that works really well if you have those adjoining moments where we see that broken. Right?
Right, totally. Like, I think the lesson learned is what we're missing.
Yeah, because that's he knows. I like the cocksure, like, I can read all these books in the library, and he is kind of flaunting and gallivanting. He's fighting the bullies, like, someone has to do. There's a really cool Frank Miller mindset in this book, but I think, and that might be the hardest part of this, is you have to have the Frank Miller mindset, but to make Superman work well, and I think get the best lens to look at it, you have to then have the Kents dissect everything that is wrong and childish about Frank Miller's worldview.
Right, exactly. Like,
an artist is self-aware enough to do that. That's a really hard task.
I think the problem is it's Frank Miller writing Superman, so who's going to tell Frank Miller this version? Like, it's Frank Miller writing Superman year one. So who in the DC upper echelon is going to tell Frank Miller, hey, Frank Miller, who reinvented comics, the superhero comics in the 1980s, you literally cannot write Superman in this way, because if you're not going to give
me that.
Like the Kent,
he's trying to dodge the Alan Moore Hall of Shame, right? It would be so interesting if Frank Miller had been like, I will use this moment to take on my own legacy. That would be fascinating. It would be perfect.
That would have been a really interesting way to do this. Right. And instead, the more bizarre thing is that
I will part the clouds of Sin City. That kind of moment.
Right.
I think that would be cool.
And instead, what's troublesome about the book, and like the thing I'm not sure I totally agree with, is that it's like the Kents were raised in Sin City and then moved to Smallville. Like, I don't think like Jonathan and Martha Kent. But Jonathan and Martha Kent should not be agreeing with Frank Miller's mindset. That's the problem.
Well,
like,
I don't think
that's
Martha
what we're essentially getting at here.
Paul Kent kind of feels like a a classic man's man who doesn't know how to interact with a child. So he does like the tough guy stuff and like, well, my grandpa was in the military. I was a military man, so this makes sense. Like, no, it doesn't. Like he's an alien murder machine. But
that's why we also
this is a great Frank Miller edition, which is sending Superman as a young man from the Midwest to the military is a perfectly interesting logic leap, right? That makes perfect sense. Sure. We grew up in the Midwest. That happens, man. So that's a perfectly interesting leap of logic. But again, why is Frank Miller doing? Like, what is Frank Miller's voice adding to this conversation? And I think that's the hardest part about the military is, again, I think that's the part of the book that's missing throughout is the lessons learned.
Yeah, I mean, the lesson he learns is that, I don't know, humanity's dog shit, and I'll save them all. Like that's like I feel like a lot of the time
he saves lives, right? Because they do this thing where he saves lives, but he doesn't follow orders, which would have gotten people killed, so he gets in trouble. And he's like, well, the military was cool when I was about to kill terrorists, but now that I can't save people and have to take orders, gross. And you're like...
Again, it's like...
Because I honestly thought... By the way, I was going to ask you, did he kill terrorists in that sequence?
Yes. 100%.
They were running through shooting terrorists. They made it seem to me, I think there's a panel where they say he refused to shoot his gun, so he didn't actually kill them. But he was walking over terrorist corpses.
I mean, I guess I don't know. I think I just made the assumption he did, but like, I don't know. I think the biggest crux of the argument for me and the issue I have with the book, and while it is a very interesting read, the problem is that every single character in this book is Frank Miller, and there's no counter argument to the Frank Miller mindset. Like, absolutely. Ma Kent, by the way, has literally like, I don't know, Rose Tycho level of dialogue in this book. Like, she's... Ma Kent's supposed to be a very big part of Superman's life, and she literally has 1 minute and 16 seconds of dialogue. So it's very bizarre to me. Like, again, almost, it's like a super... It comes from... Like, Frank Miller is just... Everybody is Frank Miller in this book. There's no other person in this book. I think that's like the bigger issue. Like,
yeah, I think it's so weird because that Frank Miller, I think his cynical worldview, what I was hoping for from this book really is Frank Miller seems to be the kind of guy that I argue with all the time about Superman, right? Which is Superman's boring. He's a Boy Scout. Oh, he's too invincible. He's too perfect. What's interesting about him? So these cynical mindsets, right, of guys who will tell you, you know, Punisher is the most deep and interesting superhero, but hates Superman. That kind of guy feels like a Frank Miller voice to me. So to have him put that lens of all the things people bitch about Superman to work, examining what makes Superman great, seemed like a really good match. And again, I think the book is fun. The art is amazing. There's some really cool moments and scenes. There's just undeniably great pages and panels. It just feels like I don't know what Frank Miller wanted me to learn about Superman, right? The only thing I learned is by arguing with my own inner voice that I don't think Frank Miller likes the same Superman I like.
Yeah, I mean, I think starting in 1986 with The Dark Knight Returns, you could make the argument that Frank Miller doesn't like any of the same superheroes we like. I mean,
which sometimes, like for Batman, that works perfect, but it feels like
Batman it worked.
His take on Superman is that what makes Superman great is that he has the power to be above rules and systems and knows it.
Yeah,
and I was like, that's not, to me. I think Superman is great because he tries to fit into our world.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what we said in our definitives. Like, that's what makes Superman wonderful is his version of humanity is so endearing because he's trying. He's trying to fit in when he shouldn't have to.
And but actually, it is an interesting book, though.
It is. It's a very interesting book. I would implore you, if you are interested in Superman, this is definitely one to own because it's still it's worth owning because it's an interesting take. I did want to ask you, based on this like totally different version of Superman that we're seeing in this book, the year one concept.
Yeah.
What other heroes, like let's do 3 each. What other heroes do you think you could assign like a year one to? And like,
right.
is there a very specific like what's the specific reason you think you could do that with? Like, who do you have? Like, do you have an idea of somebody who you could do that with?
What's also funny about this book too is I don't really think it's a 1 year. Right? Like, it felt like this could have been like a
18.
10-year. Like chapter 3 has to be more than a year away, I felt like. But okay, so let's do this. Let's each pick 3 characters you think would be really interesting to do a year 1, right? So this is the first year. The first year only of them taking up, like, either from the moment they realize they have powers to when they take up the suit and don the mission, right? So for me, a character I think would be fascinating to do a year 1 would be Constantine. Right?
Sure.
So a John Constantine year 1 would be fascinating and the way I would look at this too is use it as a chance to show us what the character was when he started. Why was it important that he use his abilities to take on this mission? And use that as a comparative point to where he is now, like what the actual mission and road has taken up from him. And so I like the idea of this optimistic young Constantine who's like, I'm going to go save the world. I'll be a bucky young sprout, right? And he's learning the dark arts from some mentor figure, whatnot. Maybe he doesn't even smoke, right? This would be how I'd end my book, though. He takes his first cigarette after the final battle, right, where like his mentor is dead. And he's just sitting there alone, covered in blood, and he fucking puts up the collar, and he takes the pack of pack of smokes off his mentor's dead body. Oh, this is going to be a long, hard life. A bit of disappointments. But that's what I think Constantine year 1, right, is being a hero in the face of you are but a man. These giant worlds of magic and gods and demons exist.
Yeah.
And how do we face that down, right? The great fear that we are nothing as men. We are playthings for bigger, scarier things. Constantine as the hero who takes that on feels very different than the Constantine we always see, which is a man kind of defeated by his like he still helps, but he's resigned to the fact that the world and almost everyone in it is shit.
Right.
So I think a year 1 of him would be a really fascinating look at where did he start before everything got so bleak.
Sure. That's good.
I think that would be a fun one.
Right.
What do you got?
I like that.
What's your first pick?
I was actually thinking one of your favorites, Swamp Thing year 1.
Yeah.
I think
How
that
would you do that?
I actually think it's a man turning into a god. That's like I was thinking like it's the reversal of a lot of these stories where like someone is imbued with someone's imbued with power, but someone's like a lot of the time we have stories where people take power away, and that kind of thing. Like you think of Thor. Like Thor has to learn to be a better man so that he can be a better god. This is a man who is forced into the role of a god. So like you start with him and like you start with Alec Holland at the accident. But the main thing is him stopping like being Alec Holland and becoming the Swamp Thing. Like and then like meeting the Parliament of the Parliament of Tree, like the Parliament of the Green.
Yeah.
Like the whole thing, him ascending to godhood and the struggle he has with shedding his mortal coil, so to speak. Like, I think that actually would be an interesting book because you would have to talk about, I mean, that feels like a Neil Gaiman book, Like, it's the ability to shed it's the ability to shed your man, to shed the manness so you can make way for the godness. I don't know how to describe it. Like, all I kept thinking was man to God. How do you write a book like that,
Well, it's also the Alec Holland's interesting, too, because he's a character who's trying to harness and defeat nature through science, who now is brought into this kind of world of, now he is the avatar of nature and magic, sent to destroy man's world of science and growth and destruction.
So maybe it's a learning experience.
Nature of our relationship with the earth, yeah. I mean, there's a lot there.
I mean, it's like unlearning everything you knew as a man to relearn everything to know as a god. Like, and maybe in that way too, it can be less about sort of the way Thor works as well, which is like magic and science are roughly the same thing. It's just a viewpoint, and that's maybe that's where you rectify the man and the god, and it's less about maybe shedding his mortalness and much more about embracing the godliness without the destruction, so to speak. Kind of.
Right.
Yeah. maybe a little bit.
Yeah,
something
that
like
would be interesting, man. I'd do that book.
Something like that. I don't know. What else? What do you got?
Fuck, man. This is hard. I feel like so many of the X-Men characters would be good.
Sure.
Right? So, like, who would be the most... My favorite X-Men are always the characters that can't hide, right? Yeah. So I've always really liked Beast and Nightcrawler, those kind of characters, right? That they don't ever get to turn back into some approximation of a man and go pretend to live in society, right? Because there is a part of...
Right.
Like, you watch the old X-Men cartoon where Storm and Rogue and Dazzler and Scott and Wolverine are like, hey, we're going down to the skating rink, right? They're just doing like a wholesome, like, or we're going to the mall to shop at Kohl's.
Right.
And Beast is like, must be cool. I'm going to sit here and hang from pipes in my underwear, right? So I think the idea of those characters is extra fascinating to me. So I think I like Nightcrawler has always been my favorite, right? So let's do Nightcrawler.
Right. Okay,
so
Nightcrawler, your one.
Picked up from, right, so you open the book on, he's picked up from the small town where the villagers think he's a demon, right? He's pulled from the church. He's brought into the X-Men. He's still feared among mutants. Goes out into the world and has to help on these missions where they're saving people from other mutants. So pick someone like, you would pick a monstrous mutant, right? Someone who can't hide as well. Someone that maybe he feels bonded to, a kinship with in a way. So put that nature, maybe it's some kind of mission he has to save a local religious group or a missionary, something like that ties in the religious overtones too.
Sure,
so you have Nightcrawler pondering, I feel like I'm a good guy, but everyone thinks I'm an evil demon or worse, a mutant, right?
Right.
And him trying to decide why fight for any of these people. Why does Nightcrawler continue to want to be part of any of these societies? And I think that's a fun way to examine not just the mutant struggle, but bring it down to a really personal level with Nightcrawler. Because, again, I think that idea of him not being able to hide amongst the populace is real. But being this kind-hearted man who wants to, in a way, I think that's a really interesting place to start a year one story.
Yeah, I like that. That's interesting. Yeah, I like that.
What does Nightcrawler do or learn in that book that makes it worth it for him to keep fighting for humankind with the X-Men? That's what that book would try to answer for me.
Right. Well, and I feel like that factors pretty heavily into the religion thing then. Like again, he's a great character because there is this wonderful religious angle. So you could use a lot of scripture, a lot of passage, a lot of do no harm from a lot of different religions, no less, too. Like, I think that's the best part. You could just make Nightcrawler almost a citizen of the world simply because he wants to learn everything. He wants to learn everything about his power, but he also wants to learn everything about being the better version of humanity. Like, he might not look like a human, but he's the best human.
Yeah, and it's got this Quasimodo aspect, too, right? Of this person who's shunned because of their look, but might have the most humanity of anyone we meet. I think that would be a fun book. I think X-Men always have that really fun extra layer, and I think that would be really good. All right, what do you got? Who else you got?
The Thing, year one. All right?
So, you know what? I thought of that one, too.
Like, we open on the book, and all Ben Grimm's trying to do, he's looking down at a mug of beer, and he's trying to figure out how to hold it. And, like, this is like a recurring theme through the book, is him looking down at smaller items and trying to figure out, how does this work for me now? Like, so you have a lot
beer,
of this, like,
his dick, all these things, yeah.
So you have a lot of this, like, this monster stuff going on where he's looking down at himself, like, how do I, his dick. Oh God. But yeah, you have a lot of this, like, him looking down at himself now, like, how do I deal with this? How do I deal with this now? Like, I am this person. I can't turn it off. And he's looking at the rest of the team. And, like, he's also, I think the other thing I was thinking about is, like, going through the motions of dealing with, like, Reed. Like, him, like, trying to bury his resentment. Like, I think the big part of the book is actually him trying to get over the fact that he's mad at Reed. And, like, trying to accept the fact that whatever's happened to him is definitely Reed's fault. But he's trying to, like, he's still like he knows he has now a higher calling to a greater thing in the world, but he still is. He's just a man, and he's a man he's a man that feels trapped inside a body that he didn't ask for. So that kind of thing. So there's a lot of this.
Yeah,
there's a lot of
and it's always
there's a lot of relevance to real life
too, because he would have taken a bullet for Reed before the accident. So in a way, he becomes this perfect avatar for his desire to protect his friend.
Right.
But then it takes
but now
him
the
out
question
of all
is,
the other everyman stuff.
Right.
That's scary.
But now the question is, does he really? What if you did it? What if like this is a weird way to draw a book, but like, and it's really complicated and difficult. But what if you did the whole book through like Ben's POV? Like not like never showing him. Like literally, he's like you just see him looking down, looking out the whole time. That I think is probably really difficult to do and terrible, but at the same time really interesting. Like almost like this, like. Almost this really interesting, like it's the way, like it's the comic book version of what was that fucking Gaspar Enter the Void, like this like Enter the Void version of the thing, like that. I feel like is the movie I'd want to. That's the book I'd want to read is about Ben Grimm's struggle with not just being the thing, but also like forgiving his friend for putting him in this situation, and then not only that, but like kind of exploiting his situation by saying we have a higher calling, we have a greater cause ahead of us now. He goes, fuck you, man. I'm a big fucking rock monster. You just look the same. Yeah. Like, I think that's thoroughly the point of the first year of Ben Grimm's life as the Thing is trying to figure out how to live his life without wanting to just kill everyone. Like that, I think is that's a book I'd like to read.
How does he open up with such an impenetrable rocky shell?
Well done. Ooh.
There you go. Yeah. That's your tag.
It ends with Alice Masters just jumping on top of him and like, ride that dick, boy. That's what it's going to be.
He's like, I absolutely can't. You're going to get so much friction burn. I don't know. Yeah, is it an absorbent orange rock dick? I don't know.
This will be the book that finally answers those questions.
Yeah. All right, comic book fans, we've been beating around the bush for years. It's time to figure this thing out. How does the rock get down? Yeah, no, I'd read that for sure. All right, who do we got? We each have one left?
One left.
Fuck. Okay, how about this one? What if you did a Dead Man Year 1?
Okay, yeah. That's cool.
So you have Boston Brand has died.
Okay.
And he doesn't quite know why. So what you do is you spend a year of him. He's teleporting into these bodies, right? And trying to come to grips with his own death by looking at kind of the cruel nature of life and death to begin with, right? So he's hunting down some killer, something like that. Maybe it's a serial killer, something along those lines, where Boston Brand is continually jumping from person to person, getting these small flashes of life while surveying constant death and misery and trying to come to grips with his loss and what he is now.
Okay.
Right? Looking at this whole cycle of why would a person who's already lost their life fight to make sure that doesn't happen to anyone else? Right. What is he trying to fulfill in himself? What has he learned that's now making him a crusader for life, even though he's dead?
Right.
But I think you could do a lot of fun stuff. Again, it would play very Sandman, jumping in and out of so many different people and point of views that you would examine what makes life living to so many different people. Maybe that's your book.
That's pretty good.
The year he dies, he learns the most about what it is to be alive. That's your concept.
Ooh, that's good. I like that. I like that a lot. Concept. That's nice.
Yeah, right. Man. All right, who would you wrap up with? Who's your final year 1 book?
I thought a lot about this. I really think Blade would be an interesting year 1.
Blade?
I
know. Walk me through. What does Blade's year 1 look like, though?
I think you start with Blade on the streets, like as a little riffraff half vampire trying to feed himself. Like I think it's like Blade the Hunger.
So you want to do what? How would you say that? Bladdin? You want to do Bladdin?
Yeah, exactly. It's a whole musical. It's really
Riff Raff, Street Rat, I don't daywalk.
By that. But yeah, so like
just
what you do is,
little Whistler. And then Whistler comes in with like a cranky old Christopherson refrain.
Okay, see, that's the important part though. It ends with him meeting Chris Christopherson Whistler. Most importantly. Like absolutely
riddle me this. So in Blade 1, what is he doing when it starts? Is it his fight versus Whistler? Is Whistler hunting him?
No. I think it starts with him literally.
Is he hunting vampires yet, or is he living as a proxy vampire?
I think he's living as a proxy vampire. That's what I like the idea of him living this way and being tortured by the fact that he's hungry all the time. And he knows he has to eat people. He still eats people, but he starts to realize what he's doing is kind of wrong. Like there is something wrong with what he's doing because the human side of him is also having this constant back and forth of like, I have to feed, I have to eat, I have to be powerful. But at the same time, like I have all this power inside, but unlocking it is very complicated because it means death and destruction for all. So like he's also like trying to eat sewer rats and then he like pukes and just he's like he can't handle it. So he's trying to figure out how to solve this problem. Oh, see, my kid hates it. There it is. That's all it is.
Everyone's a critic, dude. He just wants to hear me sing more Bladdin songs.
But yeah, I feel like the duality of
maybe
man
that's how
versus...
Whistler introduces himself, is that you never had a friend like me montage. As he starts shooting daylight serum into him.
But I feel like the duality of man versus monster, like that is like, that's probably the thing that I would look at the most when it comes to a Blade Year One book is how do you rectify that with yourself? And meeting Whistler means he meets someone who maybe understands the nature of the vampire side of him, but wants him like, you need to address the humanity you still have left.
Right. Because we are afraid of our inner hungers.
Right.
That's a very human horror story. We're always afraid of what we lust for, what we crave and desire.
Right.
Yeah, man.
And I think that's the concept I think I'd run with for a Blade Year One is like it'd be like Blade the Hunger. Like trying to figure out what it is that he's actually hungry for. Is he hungry for he's obviously he needs to eat. There is that. But then like psychologically, is he hungry for justice for his dead mother? Is he hungry for ridding the world of people like him? Is he hungry for being a vampire? Like there's a lot of other layers I think that you can address when it comes to, like you were saying, the hunger from a metaphorical standpoint.
That's
I don't
true.
know.
I think that's a good one. Let's do some quick honorable mentions without like elaborating.
Sure.
So I would think the Joker Year One might be strangely fascinating.
Sure.
You could argue maybe Todd Phillips just made a version of that.
Yeah,
but I would take away the mental illness and actually have the Joker confront what he did. Like, does the Joker in his first attack still have any humanity left in him, right? You could do a Judge Dredd Year One, right? Does he start off as the ultimate killing machine, or does he see that the law is broken and he has to go back to the law of the jungle? That might be cool. Those are two honorable mentions.
I also thought about Vision Year One, like after he's deactivated from Ultron's control. Like, how do you?
So when he wakes up, no longer a murder robot.
Right. Exactly. Now he's whatever. He's trying to live his life. Yeah. I mean, I was trying to think of one more from DC. Like DC has a lot of these Year Ones done already.
How about Magneto Year One? That would be a
Magneto
fun one.
Year One could be pretty good. Yeah.
Getting out. He's like, man, this world sucks. I'm ready to start magnetizing, bro.
I'm trying. Let's see. What is another? I'm trying to think of other villains that would be good for Year One. Like
that could be your Magneto one. Do opposites attract? Da, da, da. It's him on a midnight run with like an escaped Nazi officer.
Oh, actually, I'd read that.
Like a hot lady Nazi officer.
That's pretty good.
And then you get a free digital download of Paula Abdul's banger "Opposites Attract" with the book.
Yeah, I mean, I think like some of them have already been done before, like Green Lantern Year One, that kind of stuff. But I still think there's room to walk through. You know,
for sure. But that's what I like about the year one concept, right? Is it's saying all these heroes we've had for so long, canon and mythology, and we've had so many books and stories within movies, TV, that these heroes have so much baggage attached to them. What if you took it all the way back to square one and stripped it down to the core mission statement? Why these people started on the path that's led them to these institutions that live in all of our lives. I think that's such a fun exercise. Even if you don't do a whole book, but as a fan, just doing that, right? Like before we all start yelling at each other and arguing over what is and isn't canon, what's important about characters, take it back and see what's important for you, why you like this character and where your opinions come from based on who they are. I think that's a fun exercise, man.
Yeah, that's the best part about this kind of thing, and that's the best part about superheroes is stripping away it all for parts and just getting to the core of it is what makes this kind of exercise fun, but also what makes the character fun to like re-recognize. And that's what I think Frank Miller might have done a different way, but that's what Frank Miller's trying to do in Superman Year One, which is strip Clark for parts, but then like throw those parts away and like try to get to the point of like, what is it like to be a god on Earth? Right. And like, you know, whether you feel like he accomplished it or not is beside the point. Like, that's really the mission statement of any great comic book that's trying to tell an origin story. So.
And whether he accomplished it in his way or not, he sent me back to the beginnings of thinking, what are my year one Superman sacred cows that I want to see there?
Right.
What is the important part of the first year of Clark deciding to go down this path of savior, right? So, by fair or foul, photo negative, style or not, Frank Miller gave me exactly what I wanted, which was time to ponder the origins of this hero that means so much to me, man.
Yeah. One more to chew on, Hulk Year One. Just saying.
Just a lot of...
Well, like, remember when he was first written, it was whenever especially now too, actually, because they brought it back with Immortal Hulk, where he only comes out at night.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool. Something about that actually would work for me. Yeah, man. Great start to the beginning of the year. I hope you guys are doing well. What year ones would you like to see? Tell us if there's something we missed, and maybe there's a character you would like to see a year one from. That is where we're at. Guys, we hope that you have had a wonderful, wonderful break from us, but we're back. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be hard. It's going to be fast. While you're listening to us, pause this show, click subscribe, and then also give us a quick review. Who knows? You might help us out. You might help our metrics. Then when you're done with that, before you unpause the show, go over to our other show, Film Alchemist Podcast, hit subscribe. Also, give us a little review. That helps us as well. Then you can unpause this and hear me say, guys, Happy New Year. So glad
one more note. Over on Film Alchemist this month, we're shaking our bacon.
Oh,
All Kevin Bacon movies. We started with Hollow Man. Trimmer's on the way. It's going to be delightful. Also, guys, you can find Film Alchemist and the Longbox Sessions on our YouTube channel, The Nerd Alchemist. That's plural with an S at the end. So join us on YouTube if you want to see our faces as well.
You know our socials, guys. I don't have to tell you again. I've been doing it for a year. But just in case, we're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Just find us. Longbox Sessions. It's easy to find. Just Google. Guys, thank you so much, Boxers. I'm so happy to be back. Griffey, it's nice to see you again.
Did you see my Joey Gladstone joke? Cut
that was
it
good.
out.
Guys, from the Longbox Sessions, I'm Alex Dandino.
And I'm Josh Griffey.